Hello, and welcome to another edition of Ask Maker Educator. I'm Danny from Maker Ed, and I am super excited to be here once again to have an amazing conversation with a Maker Educator from the community. Today, we're going to be talking with Suzette Duncan, who is a wonderful educator who's done some wonderful work around equity and how we can explore ways to make the Maker education movement even more diverse and even more equitable. And she has a lot of great thoughts and a lot of great things that she's going to share. If you want to join us for this conversation, you can watch live on YouTube and share your questions and comments in the chat box there, or you can tag us on Twitter and we'll be following along and bringing in all your questions. Suzette, tell us a little bit about yourself and the work that you do. I'm very excited to have you.
Hi, I'm super excited to be here. Right now I'm kind of an educator in the wild, taking a little break from the classroom, but I've been working on a project with a friend, Abigail Joseph, on bringing teachers together for more community and storytelling and learning about technology. And I am also helping to organize the South Bay Maker Educator Meetup. Just one of many people who's helping to do that. So I'm really excited about that because there's nothing happening down here in the South Bay in the Bay Area specifically. And I'm learning a lot about design thinking right now because I think it's a really important part of making.
Awesome. And can you tell us a little bit about where you were before and some of the other experience you had before going rogue?
Yes. So I started teaching actually in Oakland, California. So I was at St. Paul's School for a few years while I got my teaching credential. And then for a long time, I was at Prospect Sierra School. And I was a 6th grade humanities teacher who used a lot of technology. And then I moved to San Francisco Friends School and was their tech integrator and started up a maker program there. We did some programs in the community, but mainly I did an elective with the students there. And we did an after-school class. We went to the Maker Fair one year. That was excellent. My latest job was at Alt School, where I tried to bring a lot of making into lower elementary. And I can talk a little bit about that because that, I think, was my best experience of seeing kids just explore and get really into channeling their creativity.
Sure. I mean, yeah. What really stood out about that for you?
What was that?
What really stood out in terms of working at Alt School, or what was particularly great about that experience?
I think, well, what we did was we set up a maker cart that was just available for kids, and I would just throw things on there. You know, cardboard tubes, pipe cleaners, et cetera, et cetera. And every morning there was kind of an hour where kids were at school but weren't in class. And so a lot of kids used that time to invent things. And it was probably their most exciting part of the day for them. And I spent a lot of time cutting cardboard and talking with them about what their inventions meant for them. And so I tried to channel that into teaching in the classroom, and our middle schoolers did a whole design unit kind of based off that cart. So that was a lot of fun.
Wow. That's really great.
Yeah.
And so at what point, do you mind muting?
Oh, I'm so sorry.
No, it's all good. And so it sounds like you've done a lot of amazing work. And so at what point in there, and what kind of pushed you to start thinking about maker education and the equitable or lack of equity within maker education, and what kind of pushed you to take this next step into really thinking about it critically like that?
You know, equity work has always been a big part of my teaching work. And so I spent a lot of time while I was at Prospect Sierra School working with teachers to kind of learn a language of equity. And we did a bias awareness curriculum with 6th graders that was really one of the most exciting things I've done as an educator, kind of teaching them the language of inclusion. And so that's always been a part of my mission as an educator. And so when I started kind of getting into teaching making, it was a question that instantly popped to my mind, because I bought the first issue of Make magazine. Like, I was super excited when I saw that, and I was like, this is what I've been like waiting for my whole life, basically. And in that magazine, like, I really wanted some mirrors, right? Some folks who looked like me in that magazine, and that's not what I experienced initially. And so, you know, I think for me that was always a question, like, how come? Why is it that so many of the features are not of people of color, specifically like Black women? So that was a question that popped up for me as soon as I started kind of thinking about making in kids.
And so what were some of the first steps you took to start tying those things together and pulling some of that inclusion language and the things you learned from your trainings into the tech integration and making that you were doing?
So one thing that I really thought about was, like, when I was at San Francisco Friends School, we're, for people who don't know, that's an independent school, but it's in the Mission in San Francisco, which is a really mostly Hispanic community. It's kind of up and coming, but it's not where many private schools are in the San Francisco Bay Area.
Sure.
And so instantly I thought, we need to get out into our community and find out how other people are interpreting making and thinking about making. So we connected with an elementary school down the street to do some exchange of ideas. And kids from that school came to us in after school, and we did some projects together. So it just felt like, because we had like resources and opportunities that those kids didn't have in their schools, that we had like an obligation to find out what they knew and what we could do together. And not just like, and not in the idea of like, we're going to teach them what we know, but like, we're going to learn together to do something. Yeah.
And what kinds of lessons or takeaways do you feel like your students had from getting to make a connection like that?
I think one of the biggest takeaways, I think, was that, say for the students, but I'd say for me, one of the big takeaways was, like, just being together doesn't mean that you're going to be exchanging. You need some way. Being together is great, but you also need to think about like how you connect to one another. So the first meeting we had, I felt was like it was really difficult, because these kids my kids had certain expectations, and the kids who came from the other school had other expectations, and they didn't have a common language of communication as well, I think. Not, you know, like, the kids that I was with were from San Francisco Friends School, were really into making it, into like soldering and building robots and that kind of thing. And the kids from the other school, actually, their experience was really different. I would say that it was like more like arts-based, or not those like tech making skills, but other kinds of making skills. And so I think we had to figure out where we met.
Yeah.
And then Scratch actually was a great equalizer in that experience.
In what way?
And so they found a way to communicate with each other and to share with one another through that program. So that was really interesting. And it was like the third or fourth meeting that we did Scratch, and that was definitely the most excited they got about working together. Because I think, yeah, it was really interesting.
How did you encourage your students to start looking for those connections and to find that language that brought them together?
A lot of it had to do with like breaking down and reflecting what we did each time. And also kind of like, you know, it was middle schoolers, like 5th, 6th, and 7th graders. So they also have a lot invested in like kind of sticking with their group, right? Not venturing out.
Right.
And so kind of coaching them also in how they can have conversations and start conversations and and that kind of thing. So reflection was a big part of what we did. And I actually kept a blog during that time so I could reflect as well on what the kids were doing, and try to improve what was happening. And I just felt like it was, for me as a teacher, I thought a lot about how I could step out of the role of how I could step into the role of facilitator versus like sage on the stage.
Sure.
Yeah.
Awesome. So this is kind of a big question, but it's the question that was submitted by one of our wonderful viewers. And so I'll let you tackle it however you want. If you were to build a space from scratch right now, what would be some things that you think are really important to keep in mind, and maybe some things that you might want to avoid if you're really thinking critically about equity and building an equitable space?
So one thing, I've thought about this quite a bit, actually. I came up with a plan for building a space, kind of like this. And one thing that I really thought was important was, in building that space, to build it with a lot of community input.
Okay.
So say there's a garage down the street from where you're creating this makerspace. Make sure that you get to know the guys at the garage and that they feel like the makerspace is part of their community and that they're going to be, invited to come in, or like ask them to teach the kids about like automobile maintenance or something like that. But I thought an important part of scratch in any community would be like getting to know who are the makers in the community and connecting them to that space. So that would be a big part of it. Because I also think when I talk to people, especially people of color that I've talked to, a lot of them don't see themselves as makers.
Yeah.
They see those things that they've been doing that are termed making as just the things that they've been doing to survive.
Sure.
And the things that they need, right? So to make sure that the people in our community who have those skills that our kids want to know feel like it's their space too. So that would be a big thing.
Definitely.
Yeah. And then the other thing is, like I love computers. I love computer games. I love playing with Scratch and like Twine and like, but I also think like the computer is a barrier sometimes, or computer-based making can be a barrier sometimes to getting some people involved. So I would say, or encouraging, I don't know, I think it's like in Finland, they call them soft and hard skills, but encouraging the soft skills, like the textiles, things that people may not term making, but feel like, but are creative and can lead you to asking questions about like, well, what if I wanted to get my teddy bear that I just made to speak? What could I do there? So encouraging them to use a route that feels familiar to get into technical aspects of making, or to stay doing kind of the more artsy things, I guess.
Totally.
Yeah.
Do you have any examples from your experience where you've helped a student or someone you work with see the way that they maybe already are a maker, or to see the making of things that they already do?
Oh, that's such a good question. So I don't think I got to do this in person, but there's one teacher in particular who I think was a great maker who would never have seen herself that way. Yeah. Her name, Charlotte Phillips, and I worked with her at Prospect Sierra, and she did this great math project where kids learned and then built the thing that they were looking at in a different scale. So for instance, a pencil, rather than being 4 inches long, they'd make it like 8 feet long.
Sure.
Right. And it was a very involved project, probably took like 2 or 3 weeks. Kids did a lot of math and measurement, but they also did a lot of making in that project. And like that for me was like such a great example of like what teachers do that is already kind of embracing maker philosophy. Yeah. But that they might not see as making.
That's a great example. Have you seen it with students as well, or helping students see? You mentioned the auto garage or places like that. where
Yeah.
students can kind of redefine the activities that they like to do and see them as making?
Yeah, there was I did this like really brief elective with like 5th and 6th graders at San Francisco Friends, where we just did a lot of experiments with different tools
Mm-hmm.
and objects. But there was one kid who was like, this is not for me.
Mm.
And every week she would kind of come and say like, I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know what this is. I don't know how to make stuff.
Yeah.
And so we got into talking about the things that she cares about. The one thing that was really important to her were pickles.
Okay.
Pickles.
Yeah. So they love what they love.
Yeah, exactly. We started talking about it, and I was like, "What would you do with a pickle if you could do anything?" And she said, "I would make a pickle stuffed animal." Huh. So I was like, "All right, that's what we're doing."
All right. And what kind of changes did you see in terms of her attitude or the way she was connecting with your class or the program?
Yeah, she was excited, and like at lunchtime we would talk about how she was going to make her pickle. She also wanted to talk, so we talked a lot about how we would make that happen. Outside of class, she definitely had like a purpose for coming to class and a feeling like this was something that involved her and her ideas, and not something that I was trying to impose on her, or that she had to build a robot or like, program a computer or something like that.
Definitely. And so why do you think that taking those steps to kind of affirm making that's already going on or connecting with these other interests is so important to making sure that this is an equitable movement? And how does that all kind of tie together, you think?
I think that's a really good question. I think for a lot of people I talk to, when they see making, they see like they don't see themselves or their interests. Mm-hmm. They see like the Raspberry Pi or 3D printing, and immediately it feels like I don't know how I would use that. But once you start talking about like what you care about, and like say what your dad can do, right? Like I remember working with the kids from the school next to San Francisco Friends, and we were doing a soldering project. And one kid said, "Oh, my dad does this to fix things in our house." Uh-huh. Then it became something that felt like, and not like something that was outside of their experience. So I think kind of that storytelling aspect or that like empathy aspect of making or creating maker experiences is really important.
Definitely. Yeah, I think that's a great point. I think that it can really help broaden the audience and broaden the way in which people engage, for sure. In general, and this may be something you have, articles worth of things to say. Why do you think it is so important to make sure that the maker movement and maker education is accessible to a variety of different people? And why do you think that there is value in making sure that this is as equitable and as diverse as possible? Oh, I think you're still muted.
Okay, now I'm unmuted. Okay, so the movie Hidden Figures really, like, when I saw that, it really like drew the picture for me.
Sure.
Of why it's there are so many different types of people in our communities, in our country, right? And different types of experiences and different types of genius. And when we don't include or don't find ways to include people from all different walks of life, we lose the opportunity to like that particular person's genius or experience, right?
Really?
So I think that is so important to me. And like when I saw that movie, I was thinking, wow, firstly I didn't know this story.
Sure.
Right? It had existed for, this was 50, 60 years ago and no one had heard this story. But then I also realized that like it felt strange to me that it was a story of a Black woman and Black women who were like mathematical geniuses.
Mm-hmm.
And it shouldn't be strange to me,
Yeah.
because if there are if there are Black people, then there are Black people who are math geniuses and art geniuses and, you know, music geniuses and writing geniuses and all of these things. But so often we don't see that because it's not reflected back to us in our culture.
Mm-hmm.
So I feel like this is one small place where, like, if the maker movement decides, like, we're gonna make sure that like every voice has the same weight, and that all these different types of experience and genius can be part of our movement, I think like it would be beautiful. And also for me, I think so much of what we're facing right now as a country and a community is about like so much of the conversation that I'm having with my child and with my partner is about like how it seems like there's not value for all the different experiences that are out there.
Right.
And so I'd love to see it be a part of this community because it's so vibrant and dynamic and innovative anyway.
Yeah.
And it belongs here.
Yeah, and making seems like a really great opportunity to illustrate that value and to find the things that are unique about all these different communities and to really highlight them in a cool, unique, different way.
Yeah, exactly. Like I think about, I think at the Maker Convening last year, Nicole Pinkard was the speaker.
Mm-hmm.
Is that her name?
Yeah.
Nicole Pinkard. And she talked a lot about just the kids that she worked with and showed video of their different the things that they created and the experiences that they had learning that they could be makers.
Yeah.
And it was, you know, like that should always be the story. Like, what communities are we in, and where are we inspiring children to find their like passions and their genius?
Totally. Yeah.
Yeah.
I love this. I love just hearing you refer over and over and over again to people and their different geniuses. I feel like that's such a wonderful phrase. It's just nice to hear. And I think it's absolutely true and like a really, really awesome way to describe what anyone who spent time in classrooms in general, but particularly in the maker education world, it's something that we all know super well, I think. So I like that a lot.
Right. Yeah. I think that's, you know, so much of a part of making is like watching a kid do something that you can't do.
Yeah.
And like being blown away.
Yeah, absolutely. Awesome. We have a couple more questions. Switching gears a little bit, but same general topic. Do you have any favorite projects that really stand out and things that you feel like really reinforce some of these ideas that we've been talking about, or that you want to make sure that you share?
Yeah, I mean, I think I shared one, which was Charlotte's project, which I think is a great one. But I think one other project that I did that really leveled kind of a playing field was Legos.
Okay.
And we didn't buy Legos. We just asked people in the community if they had Legos that they wanted to donate. So immediately we got everyone kind of involved. And then we had like thousands of them. Yeah. And then we just invited kids to come at lunchtime and play with Legos and build.
Yeah.
And it actually built a lot of community in our school to have that space for our students and to have people bring in suitcases of Legos to share. And it also feels like there's no barrier to playing with Legos, right? Like you can build a castle or you can build a box, which is like, you know, there's no barrier. You can just do you. So I think Legos are a great kind of equalizer. But I also just want to say that another project that I've never done that I really want to is to build a makerspace where the mentors are people who live in the community.
Hmm.
So that is something that like I really, really would love to see happen. And I think about like computer clubhouse. I don't know. There used to be one close to where I am down here in the South Bay. It isn't here anymore, and I think it really used that model of getting people in to the clubhouse by having them show their expertise to children. And so I think that's an important way to build community and to see everyone's genius.
Awesome. We have time, I think, for one more question, and this is one from someone who's watching right now. Hopefully they're still out there. Hello, if this is you. And their question is around how do you get started without feeling overwhelmed? So what are maybe a couple steps that you think educators out there can take to start building more equitable practice without totally overloading themselves and burning out?
Well, I think the first step is actually to educate yourself.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's super, not in terms of making, but in terms of equity practice or understanding what is equitable and what is inclusive, is to educate yourself. Like, if you're going to read a book before you go to bed about education, read Louise Derman Sparks, who talks about creating anti-bias with young children in preschool. Mm-hmm. So, and I use that book when talking with middle schoolers because I felt like, if a preschooler can learn how to act without bias, if a preschool educator can think about how he or she is teaching her children not to act with bias, then it must be good enough for middle schoolers. So I feel like educating yourself first is the way to go. And then think about where you have or where you feel what the stories are in your classroom. As a teacher, you know your students very well, or you can find out about them. And so find out what the stories are in your classroom and then build on that as your maker practice. So,
awesome.
Yeah,
those are some great tips. And I think definitely can help with that sense of this is tough and it can be a challenge, but it's a super important one. So it's definitely key to take those first steps, I think. And just to wrap up, I think we actually have a little homework for the audience. I think that something we were talking about before we went live was we and myself and Suzette are really excited to hear what you are all doing already. What are some things that you have tried or some steps you've taken to make your maker community or your maker practice more equitable? So you can, we will send out a message about this on Twitter, but you can go ahead and start tweeting at MakerEd with some of your thoughts, and we'll be sure to share those out. We're super excited to hear what's going on out there and to learn from all of your best practices. Suzette, thank you so much. This was really wonderful. I learned a lot, and I hope that everyone watching did too. Next week, we will be here again with another Ask a Maker Educator. Next week will be Museum Edition. We have some wonderful museum educators from around the country, from Children's Museum of Pittsburgh and from Texas, who are going to be joining us to chat about their work. So tune in and share your questions before then. Thanks again, Suzette, and thank you everyone for watching.
Thanks for having me.